Sometimes life has a twisted sense of irony. Picture this. You're working as a restaurant server, struggling to make ends meet as a single father, when suddenly a young girl at one of your tables starts choking. Without hesitation, you spring into action, performing the Heimlich maneuver with precision that surprises even yourself. You save her life. The girl's mother, a powerful CEO, is eternally grateful. She offers you money, connections, anything you want, but what she doesn't know, what neither of you could possibly know, is that the daughter you just saved is actually your own biological daughter. The same daughter you've been searching for since a bitter custody battle 12 years ago. The same daughter you've dreamed about every single night. And the woman thanking you? She's the one who took her away from you. This is the story of how one choking incident revealed a truth that would change 3 lives forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The dinner rush at the Golden Fork was in full swing, and David Harrison moved through the elegant dining room with practiced efficiency. At 35, his weathered hands told the story of a man who had seen better days, yet he carried himself with a quiet dignity that distinguished him from the other servers. The restaurant's mahogany walls and crystal chandeliers created an atmosphere of refined luxury, a world away from the modest studio apartment David called home in the Oakwood district. David's black uniform was immaculate, his silver nameplate catching the warm light as he balanced 3 plates with the skill of someone who had worked in hospitality for years. But the way he moved, the careful attention he paid to each detail, suggested this wasn't his first career. His colleagues at the Golden Fork knew little about his background, only that he was reliable, professional, and carried himself with an air of quiet competence that made even the restaurant's most demanding customers feel at ease. Between orders, David would steal glances at the small, worn photograph tucked behind his server notepad. The picture showed a toddler with bright hazel eyes and dark curls, her chubby hands reaching toward the camera. Emma, his daughter. The daughter he had lost in a custody battle 12 years ago when his ex-wife Sarah remarried Thomas Stone, a wealthy tech executive, and moved from Millbrook to Seattle. The legal proceedings had been swift and merciless. Sarah's new husband had hired the best family law firm in the state, painting David as an unfit father whose irregular hours as a paramedic made him unsuitable for raising a young girl. The court had agreed, deciding that Emma would have a better life with her successful mother and wealthy stepfather in their million-dollar home, rather than with her struggling father in his cramped apartment, David's modest studio apartment in the Oakwood district was a testament to his singular focus. Missing person flyers covered his kitchen table, alongside legal documents from various attorneys he'd consulted over the years. Private investigator reports were stacked in chronological order, each one ending with the same frustrating conclusion: subject's whereabouts unknown. Every spare dollar from his restaurant wages went toward the search that had consumed his life for over a decade. The walls of his apartment were covered with maps of the Pacific Northwest, marked with red pins indicating cities where Emma might have been spotted. David had driven thousands of miles following leads that led nowhere, spent countless hours on online forums for missing persons, and maintained active profiles on every social media platform, hoping against hope that Emma might one day search for him. His former colleagues at Millbrook General Hospital had tried to convince him to move on, to rebuild his life, perhaps even start a new family. But David couldn't let go. Every night, he would sit at his small kitchen table, staring at that photograph of Emma, wondering if she remembered him, if she knew he had never stopped looking for her, if she understood that losing her had been like losing a piece of his soul. The transition from paramedic to restaurant server had been born of necessity. After Emma's disappearance, David had found it impossible to focus on his medical career. The sight of families in crisis, the desperate parents in hospital waiting rooms, the scared expressions on faces, It all reminded him of his own loss. He had taken a leave of absence that became permanent, eventually finding work at the Golden Fork where the predictable routine and steady tips allowed him to maintain his search efforts. David's manager, Roberto, had noticed his reliability and attention to detail, quickly promoting him to serve in the restaurant's exclusive private dining rooms, where high-profile clients expected exceptional service. David excelled in this role, his former medical training giving him an ability to remain calm under pressure and anticipate needs before they arose. Tonight was like any other Tuesday evening. The restaurant was moderately busy, with a mix of business dinners and couples celebrating special occasions. David had been assigned to the private dining room, a secluded area reserved for the restaurant's most important guests. The room featured floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Millbrook's downtown skyline, with intimate lighting that created perfect ambiance for confidential business discussions or romantic dinners. As David prepared the room for the evening's reservation, he reviewed the details. Ms. Lucia Stone, party of 2, 7:30 p.m. The name Stone always made him pause, a painful reminder of his ex-wife's new surname and the family that had replaced him in Emma's life. But Stone was a common name, and David had learned to push through these moments of recognition that often led nowhere. The reservation notes indicated this was a regular customer, someone who specifically requested quiet seating and minimal interruption. David appreciated guests who understood the value of discretion, and he took pride in providing service that was attentive without being intrusive. As the evening progressed, David found himself thinking about Emma, as he did every day. She would be 12 now, probably in middle school, developing her own interests and personality. He wondered if she still loved astronomy like she had as a toddler, if she remembered their nights looking at stars from the fire escape of their old apartment, if she ever wondered about the father who had read her bedtime stories and taught her the names of constellations. The photograph in his notepad was starting to fade, the edges worn from years of handling. David had it digitally restored several times, but he couldn't bear to put the original away. It was his tangible connection to Emma, proof that she had been real, that their bond had existed, that he had once been someone's father. At 7:25 p.m., David straightened his tie and made his way to the private dining room to welcome his guests. He had no idea that in just a few minutes, his carefully constructed world would be turned upside down, and the daughter he had been searching for would be sitting at his table, closer than she had been in 12 years. Lucia Stone entered the private dining room at exactly 7:30 p.m., her presence commanding attention even in the subdued lighting. At 38, she carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. Her tailored charcoal business suit was impeccably cut, and her auburn hair was pulled back in a style that was both professional and elegant. As the CEO of Novatech Solutions, a rapidly growing software company, Lucia was known for her sharp business acumen and demanding standards. Following close behind was her daughter, Sophia, a bright-eyed 12-year-old with dark curls that seemed to have a mind of their own. Despite her mother's formal attire, Sophia had chosen a more casual outfit, a navy blue dress with small star patterns that caught the light as she moved. Her face lit up with excitement as she took in the elegant surroundings of the private dining room. "Mom, this place is so fancy," Sophia exclaimed, her voice filled with the enthusiasm that only someone her age could muster for a simple dinner out. Lucia smiled, her stern business facade softening as she watched her daughter's reaction. "It's a special night, sweetheart. We don't get to spend enough time together, just the two of us." The statement carried weight beyond its surface meaning. Lucia's demanding schedule as CEO meant that quality time with Sophia was often squeezed. Between board meetings, conference calls, and business trips, tonight was meant to be different. No phones, no work distractions, just mother enjoying each other's company. David approached their table with professional composure. though something about the young girl made him pause for just a moment. There was something familiar about her animated gestures, the way she tilted her head when she was excited, but he dismissed the thought as wishful thinking. After years of searching, he sometimes saw Emma in every girl around her age. "Good evening, Ms. Stone," David said with practiced courtesy. "Welcome to the Golden Fork. I'm David, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." Lucia looked up from her phone, where she had been checking messages despite her promise to herself to avoid work. "Thank you, David. We'll need a few minutes to review the menu." "Of course," David replied, setting down 2 leather-bound menus. "Can I start you with something to drink?" Sophia immediately perked up. "Can I have a chocolate milkshake, please?" She looked at her mother with hopeful eyes. Lucia hesitated. "Sophia, we're at a nice restaurant. Maybe something more appropriate. How about a chocolate milk?" David suggested diplomatically. "We can serve it in a proper glass with a straw." "That sounds perfect," Lucia agreed, grateful for the compromise. "And I'll have a glass of the house Chardonnay." As David left to prepare their drinks, Sophia began examining the menu with intense concentration. "Mom, look at all these fancy names. What's beef Wellington?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Lucia put her phone aside and leaned forward, engaging with her daughter's curiosity. "It's beef wrapped in pastry with mushrooms and herbs. It's actually quite delicious. Can I try it?" "You always say I should try new things." "It might be a bit sophisticated for your palate, sweetheart. How about the filet mignon?" "It's tender and not too complicated." Sophia considered this. "Okay, but I want to eat it like a grown-up. No cutting it up for me." Lucia laughed, a sound that was both amused and slightly worried. "All right, but promise me you'll be careful. Take small bites and chew thoroughly." When David returned with their drinks, they were ready to order. Sophia proudly announced her choice of filet mignon, cooked medium well, with a side of roasted vegetables. Lucia opted for the salmon with quinoa pilaf, a lighter option that wouldn't interfere with her evening workout routine. "Excellent choices," David said, making notes on his pad. "The filet mignon is one of our signature dishes. I'll make sure the chef knows it's for a discerning young diner." As they waited for their food, Sophia peppered her mother with questions about everything, from the restaurant's history to the meaning of the French phrases on the menu. Lucia found herself relaxing for the first time in weeks, enjoying her daughter's boundless curiosity and quick wit. "Mom, do you remember when I was little and you used to tell me stories about the stars?" Sophia asked suddenly. Lucia's expression flickered with something that might have been discomfort. Yes, of course. You loved astronomy." "I still do. My science teacher says I have a real aptitude for it. Maybe I could get a telescope for my birthday." "We'll see," Lucia replied, a standard parental response that meant, probably not right now. When their meals arrived, David presented them with the flourish expected in a restaurant of the Golden Fork's caliber. Sophia's filet mignon was perfectly cooked, tender and juicy, accompanied by colorful roasted vegetables that had been arranged artistically on the plate. "This looks amazing," Sophia exclaimed, immediately picking up her knife and fork. "Remember what I said about taking small bites," Lucia cautioned. But she was smiling at her daughter's enthusiasm. Sophia nodded eagerly and cut into her steak. The first few bites went well, with Sophia making appreciative sounds and complimenting the flavors. But as she grew more comfortable and excited about the meal, her bites became larger and her chewing more hurried. "Sophia, slow down," Lucia said gently. "There's no rush." "Sorry, Mom, it's just so good," Sophia replied, already cutting another piece. It was the fourth bite that changed everything. Sophia, eager to impress her mother with her grown-up dining skills, cut a piece of steak that was too large and attempted to swallow it without adequate chewing. The meat was tender, but the piece was substantial enough to lodge in her throat. At first, Sophia simply looked confused. She put her hand to her throat and made a small sound, not quite a cough. Lucia, engaged in reviewing her salmon, didn't immediately notice. Then Sophia's eyes widened with panic. She grasped her throat with both hands, her mouth opening and closing. Silently, no sound came out, not a cough, not a word, nothing. "Sophia?" Lucia looked up from her plate, immediately sensing something was wrong. Sophia's face was beginning to turn red. She pushed back from the table, knocking over her chocolate milk in the process. Her eyes were wide with terror as she pointed frantically at her throat. "Oh my God, Sophia, what's wrong?" Lucia jumped up from her chair, her own panic evident. In her voice, Sophia couldn't respond. The piece of steak was completely blocking her airway. She couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, couldn't even make the choking sounds that might have immediately alerted others to her distress. Lucia grabbed her daughter's shoulders, shaking her gently. "Sophia, can you breathe? Can you cough?" But Sophia's face was turning from red to purple. Her eyes were rolling back slightly, and her body was beginning to go limp. The choking was complete and severe, a medical emergency that required immediate intervention. Lucia's mind raced. She had no medical training, no idea what to do. She looked around the empty private dining room, feeling helpless and terrified. Her successful career, her ability to manage complex business crises, all of it meant nothing in this moment when her daughter was dying in front of her. "Help!" Lucia screamed, her voice cracking with desperation. "Someone help us!" David Harrison was in the main dining room, checking on his other tables when he heard the scream. The sound cut through the gentle murmur of dinner conversation. Like a blade, filled with a terror that immediately triggered his paramedic instincts. He had heard that exact tone before, the primal cry of a parent facing their worst nightmare. Without hesitation, David dropped the water pitcher he was carrying and ran toward the private dining room. His muscle memory from years of emergency. Medical response kicked in, his body moving with purpose while his mind cataloged potential scenarios. The scream had come from Miss Stone's table, and the panic in her voice suggested a medical emergency. Through the glass door of the private dining room, David could see Lucia Stone standing over her daughter, who was slumped forward in her chair. The girl's face was an alarming shade of purple, and her mother was shaking her shoulders frantically. Even from the doorway, David could see the classic signs of severe choking, the inability to cough or speak, the color change, the position of the hands at the throat. "Step back, please," David commanded as he burst through the door, his voice carrying an authority that surprised even him. The mild-mannered server had vanished, replaced by someone who clearly knew how to handle a crisis. Lucia looked up at him with desperate eyes. "She's choking. I don't know what to do." David was already moving, his hands assessing the situation with practiced efficiency. "What did she eat?" "Steak. She took too big a bite." Lucia stepped back, giving David room to work. David quickly positioned himself behind Sophia's chair, gently but firmly lifting her to her feet. Her body was starting to go limp, a sign that oxygen deprivation was becoming critical. He had perhaps 60 seconds before she would lose consciousness entirely. "Sophia, can you hear me?" David spoke directly to her, his voice calm and reassuring. "Despite the urgency of the situation, I'm going to help you. Just stay with me." Sophia's eyes focused on him briefly, filled with terror but also a flicker of recognition, not of who he was, but of someone who might be able to save her. David wrapped his arms around Sophia from behind, positioning his hands correctly for the Heimlich maneuver. His left hand formed a fist, placing it just above her navel and below her ribcage. His right hand covered the fist, and he prepared to deliver the upward thrusts that could dislodge the obstruction. "This might hurt a little, but I need you to try to relax," he told Sophia, though he knew she probably couldn't hear him clearly through her panic. The first thrust was firm and upward, designed to create artificial coughing by forcing the air from the lungs. Nothing happened. Sophia's color was getting worse, and her struggles were becoming weaker. David repositioned slightly, ensuring his technique was perfect. In his paramedic days, he had performed this procedure dozens of times, but never on someone who felt so small and fragile in his arms. There was something about holding this particular girl that made his heart race beyond the normal adrenaline of an emergency situation. The second thrust was more forceful. Still nothing. Lucia was pacing behind him, her hands clasped together. In prayer, tears streaming down her face. "Come on, sweetheart," David whispered, preparing for the third attempt. "You're going to be okay." The third thrust produced a small movement. He could feel something shift in Sophia's throat, but the obstruction wasn't fully dislodged. Her body was becoming heavier in his arms, and he knew consciousness was slipping away. David adjusted his grip one more time, drawing on every technique he had learned in his medical training. This thrust needed to be perfect, forceful enough to dislodge the meat, but not so violent as to cause internal injury. The fourth thrust was delivered with precise force, angled slightly upward and inward. David felt the shift immediately. The obstruction moving, the airways beginning to clear. The piece of steak flew across the room, landing on the floor near the window. Sophia immediately gasped, a raspy, desperate sound that was the most beautiful thing David had ever heard. She coughed violently, her body convulsing as oxygen flooded back into her lungs. "That's it, breathe," David encouraged, still supporting her weight as she recovered. "Just breathe. You're okay now." Sophia's color began to return to normal, the purple fading to red and then to her natural complexion. She was crying now, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body, but she was breathing. David gently guided her back to her chair, kneeling beside her to check her pulse and breathing. His movements were those of someone with extensive medical training, checking her airway, monitoring her vital signs, assessing for any additional injuries. "How do you feel?" he asked Sophia, his voice gentle but professional. "Any pain in your throat or chest?" Sophia nodded, touching her throat gingerly. "It hurts," she whispered, her voice hoarse from the trauma. "That's normal," David assured her. "The soreness will fade in a day or two. You're going to be fine." He looked up at Lucia, who was standing frozen in shock. "She should be checked by a doctor, just to be safe. The emergency room at Millbrook General can do a quick examination to make sure there's no throat damage." Lucia nodded mutely, still processing what had just happened. Her daughter had been dying, and this restaurant server had saved her life with skills that seemed far beyond his apparent job description. David stood up, his professional demeanor intact, but Lucia could see his hands trembling slightly. Whatever his background, this had affected him deeply. "How did you know exactly what to do?" Lucia asked, her voice still shaky. David hesitated for a moment, his eyes meeting hers. "I used to be a paramedic, a long time ago." The simple statement carried weight. Lucia realized that the man she had assumed was just a server had years of medical training and emergency experience. He had saved Sophia's life not through luck or basic first aid, but through professional expertise. "Thank you," Lucia whispered, the words feeling inadequate for what had just transpired. "You saved my daughter's life." David looked down at Sophia, who was still catching her breath, but whose color had returned to normal. Something about her face, the way she looked at him with gratitude and trust, stirred something deep in his chest. He felt a connection to this girl that went beyond the normal satisfaction of helping someone in need. "I'm just glad I was here," he said softly, his eyes never leaving Sophia's face. "She's going to be fine." The private dining room fell into a surreal quiet after the chaos of the previous minutes. The only sounds were Sophia's gradually steadying breathing, and the distant murmur of other diners who remained unaware of the life and death drama that had just unfolded behind the glass doors. David remained kneeling beside Sophia's chair, his trained eyes monitoring her recovery. Her color had returned to normal, but he could see the exhaustion in her posture, the way she leaned against the chair back, her small hands still occasionally touching her throat. The trauma of choking was as much psychological as physical, and he knew she would need time to process what had happened. "How are you feeling now, sweetheart?" David asked, his voice gentle and reassuring. The endearment slipped out naturally, something he might have said to any youngster in distress, but it felt different on his lips when directed at this particular girl. Sophia looked up at him with eyes that seemed older than her 12 years. "Better," she whispered, her voice still hoarse. "Thank you for helping me." The simple gratitude in her words hit David harder than expected. He had to look away for a moment, overwhelmed by an emotion he couldn't quite identify. There was something about this girl, the way she held herself, the inflection in her voice, even the way she said, "thank you," that resonated with memories he had tried to keep buried. Lucia finally unfroze from her state of shock, moving quickly to her daughter's side. She knelt on the opposite side of the chair, her hands hovering over Sophia, as if she was afraid to touch her, afraid that contact might somehow make the nightmare real. "Baby, I'm so sorry," Lucia whispered, her voice breaking. "I should have." Then, watching more carefully, "I should have made sure you were taking smaller bites." "Mom, it's okay," Sophia said, reaching out to take her mother's hand. "I'm okay now." David watched the interaction between mother and daughter with a mixture of professional assessment and personal pain. He recognized the guilt in Lucia's eyes, the self-blame that every parent felt when their youngster was hurt on their watch. He had seen it countless times in his paramedic days, but he had also felt it himself, the crushing weight of feeling responsible for harm that comes to someone you love, Miss Stone, David said gently, drawing Lucia's attention. "This wasn't your fault. Choking can happen to anyone, especially with meat that seems tender, but can still cause problems if not chewed properly." Lucia looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "But I told her to take smaller bites. I should have been more insistent." "You were being a good mother," David replied. "Sometimes accidents happen despite our best efforts. The important thing is that Sophia is okay now." As if to emphasize his point, Sophia straightened up in her chair, some of her natural energy returning. "David, that's your name, right? You were amazing. Where did you learn to do that?" The question hung in the air, and David felt both women's eyes on him. He had revealed his medical background in the heat of the moment, but now he was faced with explaining how a paramedic had ended up serving tables at an upscale restaurant. "I was a paramedic for about 8 years, David said carefully. "I worked at Millbrook General Hospital before I made a career change." "Why did you leave medicine?" Lucia asked, her business instincts picking up on the careful phrasing. David's expression grew distant, and he unconsciously glanced toward his service station where his notepad and Emma's photograph waited. "Personal reasons. Sometimes life takes you in directions you don't expect." The vague answer satisfied neither woman, but both sensed that pushing for details would be inappropriate given the circumstances. Instead, Lucia focused on her immediate concern. "Should I take her to the hospital? You mentioned Millbrook General." "It wouldn't hurt to have her checked out," David said, shifting back into professional mode. "The emergency room can do a quick examination to make sure there's no damage to her throat or airway. It's probably unnecessary, but better safe than sorry." Sophia made a face. "Do I have to go to the hospital? I feel fine now." "It's just a precaution, sweetheart," David explained. "They'll look at your throat with a light, maybe listen to your breathing. It won't take long." Lucia was already reaching for her phone to call her driver, but David held up a hand. "Actually, I'd recommend against having her lie down in a car right now." The throat tissues might be swollen, and sitting upright is better for her breathing. I can drive us, Lucia said, then paused. Actually, my car is a low sports car. Would sitting upright in that be okay? David considered this. If you have access to an SUV or sedan, that would be better. Something where she can sit normally without having to recline. I'll call my assistant. She can bring my company car. Lucia was already dialing, her CEO efficiency taking over now that she had a clear course of action. While Lucia made arrangements, David turned his attention back to Sophia. She was looking around the dining room, seemingly fascinated by details she hadn't noticed before. The crystal chandelier, the artwork on the walls, the way the city lights twinkled through the windows. Do you like working here? She asked. David suddenly thought the question caught him off guard. It's a good job. I like helping people have pleasant evenings. But you used to help people in a different way, right? As a paramedic? David nodded, impressed by her perceptiveness. Yes. I did. Do you miss it? The question hit deeper than she could have known. David looked at this bright, curious girl who had just faced a life-threatening situation with remarkable composure, and he felt something crack inside his chest. Sometimes, he admitted, but things change. Sometimes we have to make different choices. Sophia tilted her head, a gesture that sent a jolt of recognition through David's system. Emma used to do exactly that when she was thinking about something complex. My mom says that people change jobs when they need to take care of what's most important to them, Sophia said thoughtfully. Is that why you changed? David's breath caught. The innocent question had hit so close to the truth that he couldn't speak for a moment. He had left medicine to search for Emma, to be available for the call that never came, to keep looking for what was most important to him. Yes, he said finally. That's exactly why. Lucia finished her call and returned to the table. My assistant will be here in 10 minutes with the car. Sophia, how do you feel about leaving? I'm okay to go, Sophia said, though she looked reluctant to leave David. Will you be here when we come back? I work most evenings, David said. I'm sure we'll see each other again. Lucia stood up, then seemed to remember something. She reached into her purse and pulled out her wallet. Please let me give you something. You saved my daughter's life. I can't just walk away without. No, David interrupted gently but firmly. I don't want your money. But surely there's something. The best thanks you can give me is taking good care of her, David said, looking at Sophia. She's special. Make sure she knows that. Lucia studied his face, puzzled by the emotion in his voice. She is special. She's the most important thing in my world. David nodded, filing away the information. He helped Sophia to her feet, noting that she was steady and alert. The immediate crisis had passed, but he found himself reluctant to let them leave. Sophia, he said as they prepared to go, remember what I said about taking smaller bites when you eat steak, okay? Okay? She smiled, the first genuine smile since the choking incident. I will, and David, thank you for saving my life. The simple words, delivered with such sincerity, nearly undid him. David knelt down to her level, looking into her bright eyes that seemed so familiar it hurt. You're very welcome, he said softly. Be careful out there, okay? As they left the private dining room, David stood in the doorway watching them go. Lucia had her arm around Sophia's shoulders, guiding her through the main dining room with protective care. Something about the scene, the way Sophia walked, the tilt of her head, the way she looked back at him with a small wave, made David's chest tight with an emotion he couldn't name. He walked slowly back to his service station, his hands shaking slightly as he picked up his notepad. Emma's photograph stared back at him, and for the first time in years, David wondered if he was losing his mind. The resemblance between the girl in the picture and the girl he had just saved was impossible to ignore, but resemblance meant nothing. He had learned that lesson painfully over the years, chasing similarities that led nowhere. Still, as he cleared the disrupted table in the private dining room, David couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened. Something that went far beyond a simple medical emergency. The piece of steak that had nearly killed Sophia still lay on the floor where it had landed. David picked it up with a napkin, staring at the small piece of meat that had almost changed everything. If he hadn't been there, if he hadn't acted quickly enough, if his medical training hadn't kicked in, he shook his head, forcing himself to focus on the present. Sophia was safe, she was breathing, and she would be fine. That was what mattered. The rest, the resemblance, the way she had looked at him, the connection he had felt, was just his imagination. Just the wishful thinking of a man who had been searching for his daughter for too long. But as David returned to his other tables, he couldn't stop thinking about the way Sophia had said thank you, and how it had sounded exactly like Emma's voice in his memories. The hospital visit had been routine, just as David had predicted. Sophia's throat showed minor irritation, but no lasting damage, and the emergency room physician, a former colleague of David's who didn't recognize him, had cleared her for normal activities. Within a week, Lucia had called the Golden Fork to request a reservation in the private dining room, specifically asking for David as their server. "I want to thank him properly," Lucia had told the hostess, though she couldn't fully explain even to herself why she felt compelled to return to the scene of such a traumatic event. When they arrived the following Tuesday, David felt his heart rate increase as he saw them walk through the restaurant. Sophia looked completely recovered, her cheeks rosy with health and her eyes bright with curiosity. She was wearing a different dress, this one deep blue with small silver stars scattered across the fabric, and David found himself staring at the pattern longer than was professionally appropriate. "David!" Sophia called out when she saw him, her face lighting up with genuine pleasure. "We came back." "I can see that," David replied, smiling despite himself. "How are you feeling?" "Perfect," Sophia announced. "The doctor said I'm completely fine. Mom wanted to come back to thank you again." Lucia approached more cautiously, her business instincts still processing the server who had revealed medical expertise far beyond his apparent position. "David, I hope you don't mind us requesting you specifically," Sophia insisted. "Of course not," David assured her, though he was puzzled by his own reaction to seeing them again. "I'm glad you're both well." Over the course of the evening, David found himself drawn into conversations that went well beyond the usual server-customer dynamic. Sophia was endlessly curious about everything: the restaurant's history, the preparation of various dishes, and especially about David's background. "So you were a paramedic before you worked here?" she asked during a lull between courses. "That's right," David confirmed, refilling her water glass. "Did you always want to be a paramedic?" David paused, considering how to answer. "I wanted to help people. Medicine seemed like the best way to do that." "But you still help people here," Sophia pointed out. "You helped me." The simple logic of her statement struck David as profound. "You're right. I suppose helping people takes many forms." Lucia watched these exchanges with growing interest. She had expected David to maintain professional distance, but instead he seemed genuinely engaged with Sophia's questions. More than that, he seemed to anticipate her daughter's needs, refilling drinks before they were empty, adjusting the lighting when Sophia squinted, even bringing her a small bowl of vanilla ice cream when she mentioned feeling slightly nauseous. A common aftereffect of choking incidents, he had explained. "You're very intuitive with her," Lucia commented when Sophia excused herself to use the restroom. David looked surprised by the observation. "I suppose I've always been good with young people. It was part of the job." "Are you close to your family?" Lucia asked, her business instincts probing for information that might explain his unusual attentiveness. David's expression grew distant. "I have a daughter. I haven't seen her in many years." "I'm sorry," Lucia said, though something in her tone suggested discomfort with the topic. "Divorce can be complicated." "It wasn't really about divorce," David said carefully. "It was about custody. Sometimes the courts decide that other arrangements are better for the youngster." Lucia's face went pale, and she quickly changed the subject. "Sophia mentioned that you know about astronomy. She's developed quite an interest in it." When Sophia returned, she immediately picked up on the mention of astronomy. "David, do you really know about stars?" "A little," David admitted. "I used to enjoy looking at them." "Me too. Mom got me a book about constellations, but some of it is hard to understand. The pictures are confusing." David found himself leaning closer, his voice becoming more animated. "The key is to start with the brightest stars and work your way out. Like Polaris, the North Star. Once you can find that, you can locate the Big Dipper, and from there you can map out most of the northern sky." Sophia's eyes widened with interest. "Could you show me sometime? I mean, if you're not too busy?" Lucia started to intervene. It wasn't appropriate to ask the restaurant staff for personal favors, but David's response surprised her. "I'd like that," he said simply. "The roof of this building has a good view of the sky. If your mother doesn't mind, maybe we could step up there after dinner sometime." "Really?" Sophia's excitement was infectious. "Mom, can we?" Lucia found herself agreeing, though she couldn't explain why. There was something about David's offer that seemed genuine, not the forced politeness of someone trying to secure a good tip. That evening marked the beginning of a routine that would continue for several weeks. Lucia and Sophia would dine at the Golden Fork every Tuesday, always requesting David's section. What had started as gratitude gradually evolved into something more complex, a connection that none of them fully understood, but all of them seemed to crave. During their third visit, David learned that Sophia was struggling with a science project about the solar system. Without being asked, he brought her a napkin on which he had sketched the relative positions of the planets, complete with orbital periods and distinguishing characteristics. "How do you know all this?" Sophia asked, studying the detailed diagram. "I used to explain it to someone else," David said quietly. "A long time ago, your daughter?" David nodded, his throat tight. "She loved astronomy when she was younger, about your age." "What happened to her?" Sophia asked with the directness that only young people could manage. "She moved away," David said simply. "I haven't been able to find her." Sophia considered this with the seriousness of someone trying to understand adult complexities. "Do you think she still likes astronomy?" "I hope so," David whispered. "I hope she remembers the things we talked about." Lucia watched this exchange with growing unease. There was something in David's expression when he looked at Sophia, something that went beyond professional interest or even general kindness. It was the look of someone seeing something precious that had been lost. During their fourth visit, Sophia had a minor panic attack when a busboy accidentally dropped a tray of glasses near their table. The sound was sudden and sharp, and it triggered memories of the choking incident. She began hyperventilating, her face flushed with anxiety. David appeared at their table instantly, as if he had been watching for signs of distress. "Sophia, look at me," he said in a calm, authoritative voice. "You're okay, you're safe." He guided her through breathing exercises with the expertise of someone who had dealt with panic attacks before. "In through your nose, slowly. Hold it for 3 counts. Now out through your mouth. That's perfect." Within minutes, Sophia's breathing had returned to normal, and her color had improved. She looked up at David with grateful eyes. "How did you know what to do?" "Panic attacks are common after traumatic experiences," David explained. "Your body is just remembering what happened and trying to protect you. It's completely normal." Lucia was amazed. "You seem to know exactly what she needs." David's response was barely audible. "I've had practice." As the weeks passed, David found himself looking forward to Tuesday evenings with an anticipation that went beyond professional courtesy. Sophia's laugh became the highlight of his week, and her questions about everything from astronomy to his paramedic experiences gave him opportunities to share knowledge he had thought he would never use again. More troubling were the moments when Sophia would make a gesture or express a thought that reminded him so strongly of Emma that he had to excuse himself to regain his composure. The way she wrinkled her nose when she was thinking deeply. The way she absently twisted her dark curls around her finger when she was concentrating. The way she said exactly when she understood something complicated. During their 6th visit, Sophia mentioned that she was adopted, a revelation that hit David like a physical blow. "I've known since I was little," she said matter-of-factly. "Mom says my birth parents couldn't take care of me, so they found me a better home." David's hands trembled as he refilled her water glass. Do you ever wonder about them? Your birth parents?" "Sometimes," Sophia admitted. "I wonder if they think about me too. If they're proud of the person I'm becoming." David had to leave the table abruptly, claiming he needed to check on another customer. In reality, he stood in the service corridor, leaning against the wall with his eyes closed, trying to process what he had just heard. Sophia was adopted. She was 12 years old. She had dark curls and bright eyes and a passion for astronomy. She reminded him of Emma in ways that went beyond physical resemblance, in gestures and expressions and turns of phrase that seemed too specific to be coincidence. But David had learned to be cautious about hope. Over the years he had followed dozens of leads that had seemed promising, only to discover they led nowhere. The last thing he could afford was to let wishful thinking cloud his judgment. Still, as he returned to their table and watched Sophia explain her latest science project, with animated gestures, David couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was happening. Something that went far beyond the gratitude of a customer or the professional satisfaction of helping someone in need. When they prepared to leave that evening, Sophia surprised him by giving him a small handmade card. On the front, she had drawn a picture of the night sky, complete with constellations they had discussed. Inside, in her careful handwriting, she had written, "Thank you for teaching me about the stars. You make them seem less far away." As David read the card, his vision blurred with tears he couldn't explain. Emma had given him similar cards when she was small, artistic expressions of appreciation that had covered his refrigerator and filled his heart with pride. "This is beautiful," he managed to say. "I'll treasure it." "Will you be here next Tuesday?" Sophia asked, and David heard something in her voice, a note of worry, as if she feared he might disappear. "I'll be here," he promised, and meant it. More than she could possibly know. That night, David sat in his apartment, staring at Sophia's card and the faded photograph of Emma. The resemblance was undeniable, but resemblance wasn't proof. The timing was right, but timing could be coincidental. The way Sophia looked at him, the way she seemed to trust him instinctively, the way she reminded him of Emma in 100 small ways, it could all be the desperate imagination of a man who had been searching for his daughter for too long. But as David placed Sophia's card next to Emma's photograph on his kitchen table, he couldn't ignore the growing certainty in his chest. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't wishful thinking. This was something real, something that demanded investigation, something that might finally give him the answers he had been seeking for 12 years. The question was, what was he going to do about it? The transformation in their relationship became evident during their 7th visit to the Golden Fork. David had been looking forward to Tuesday all week, though he tried to convince himself it was simply professional pride in providing excellent service. When Lucia and Sophia arrived, they were accompanied by an unexpected guest, Dr. Patricia Hendricks, Sophia's pediatrician. "I wanted Dr. Hendricks to meet the man who saved Sophia's life," Lucia explained as they settled into their usual seats. In the private dining room, She was impressed by your quick thinking. Dr. Hendricks, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, shook David's hand warmly. Lucia told me you used to be a paramedic. Your response was textbook. Perfect. Where did you train? Millbrook Community College, then additional certification through Millbrook General. David replied, his professional demeanor automatically engaging. Dr. Martinez was the head of the emergency medicine program when I went through training. Dr. Hendricks continued, Did you work with him? David's expression grew thoughtful. Yes, I knew Carlos. Good man. He taught me a lot about pediatric emergencies. Small world, Dr. Hendricks mused. He always said the best paramedics were the ones who could stay calm under pressure while still connecting with their patients on a personal level. As the conversation continued, David found himself discussing medical procedures and emergency protocols with a fluency that surprised both women. It became clear that his knowledge was extensive and current, far beyond what would be expected from someone who had left the field years ago. You clearly kept up with continuing education, Dr. Hendricks observed. That's commendable. David's response was evasive. I've always been interested in medicine. Hard to let go of old habits. What he didn't mention was that he had maintained his certifications and continued his medical education specifically because of Emma. In his mind, staying current with pediatric emergency medicine was part of being ready for the day he found her, ready to protect her, to help her if she needed it, to be the father she deserved. After Dr. Hendricks left, Sophia immediately bombarded David with questions about his medical background. So you could still work as a paramedic if you wanted to? Technically, yes, David admitted. But I'm happy where I am. Are you really? Sophia asked with the perceptiveness that continued to surprise him. You seem sad sometimes when you talk about medicine. The observation hit closer to home than David was comfortable with. Change is hard for everyone, Sophia. Sometimes we make choices that are right for us, even if they're not easy. My mom says that too, Sophia replied. She says she made some hard choices when I was little to make sure I had a good life. David's attention sharpened. What kind of choices? Sophia shrugged. I don't know exactly. She doesn't like to talk about it. But I think it had something to do with my birth parents. She gets this look on her face when I ask too many questions. Before David could respond, Lucia returned from a business call she had taken outside. Sorry about that. Crisis at the office. Mom. David was just telling me about being a paramedic, Sophia said excitedly. Did you know he could still work in hospitals if he wanted to? Lucia's expression grew guarded. That's interesting. Why did you leave medicine, David? The question hung in the air, and David felt both sets of eyes on him. He had been carefully avoiding this topic for weeks, but he sensed that continued evasion would damage the trust he had been building with Sophia. I had a daughter, he said carefully. When I lost custody of her, I found it difficult to focus on my medical career. Every emergency call, every scared parent, every injured youngster, it all reminded me of what I had lost. Sophia's eyes widened with sympathy. That must have been terrible. It was, David agreed. But working here, meeting people like you, it's helped me remember why I wanted to help people in the first place. Lucia shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Custody battles can be very complicated. I'm sure everyone involved was trying to do what was best for the youngster. Perhaps, David said, though his tone suggested he didn't entirely agree. But losing a daughter changes everything. It makes you question every choice you've made, every priority you've set. The conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the table next to theirs. A businessman dining alone had begun showing signs of what David immediately recognized as a heart attack. Clutching his chest, sweating profusely, struggling to breathe. Without hesitation, David moved to the man's table. Sir, I'm going to help you. Can you tell me where the pain is? The man pointed to his chest, unable to speak. David quickly assessed his condition: rapid pulse, clammy skin, classic signs of cardiac distress. "I need you to call 911 immediately," David told Lucia, his voice calm but urgent. "Tell them we have a probable heart attack at the Golden Fork restaurant." While Lucia made the call, David helped the man to the floor and began checking his vital signs. He loosened the man's tie and collar, positioned him for optimal breathing, and began talking him through relaxation techniques designed to reduce cardiac stress. "You're going to be fine," David assured the man. "The paramedics are on their way. I want you to focus on taking slow, deep breaths. That's it." Sophia watched in fascination as David worked, his movements confident and professional. This was a side of him she had never seen, completely in control, utterly focused, saving someone's life with skills that seemed almost magical. When the paramedics arrived, they immediately recognized David's competence. "What's his status?" the lead paramedic asked. "Probable A onset about 5 minutes ago," David reported. "Pulse is rapid but strong. Blood pressure feels elevated. Patient is conscious and responsive. I've got him positioned and started on breathing exercises." The paramedics took over, but their lead approached David as they prepared to transport the patient. "Nice work. You former medical?" "Paramedic," David confirmed. "Long time ago." "You haven't lost your touch," the man said with respect. "Thanks for the assist." As the ambulance pulled away, David returned to their table to find Sophia staring at him with something approaching awe. "That was incredible," she breathed. "You were like a superhero." David smiled, genuinely pleased by her admiration. "Just training. Any paramedic would have done the same thing." "But you're not a paramedic anymore," Sophia pointed out. "You're a restaurant server. Why don't you go back to medicine?" The question pierced through David's defenses. He looked at this bright, curious girl who seemed to see right through his carefully constructed barriers, and he felt something shift in his chest. "Because," he said slowly, "I've been waiting for something. Something more important than any career." "What kind of something?" David hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I've been waiting to find my daughter. Everything else in my life has been on hold until that happens." Sophia considered this with the seriousness of someone trying to understand adult complexities. "Do you think she's looking for you too?" The question hit David like a physical blow. "I hope so. I hope she knows that I never stopped trying to find her." "I bet she does," Sophia said with the confidence of youth. "I bet she thinks about you. All the time." That evening, after Lucia and Sophia had left, David found himself thinking about the girl's words. The way she had looked at him during the medical emergency, the confidence in her voice when she talked about his lost daughter, the way she seemed to understand his pain without having to be told about it. 2 days later, David received a call at the restaurant that would change everything. "David Harrison?" The voice was unfamiliar, female, professionally polite. "Yes? This is Margaret Chun from Millbrook Middle School. Sophia Stone gave me your number. She said you were a friend of her family." David's heart rate increased. "Yes. I know Sophia. Is she all right?" "She's fine, but she had a panic attack during a fire drill today. She specifically asked for you. Her mother is in meetings and can't be reached immediately. I know this is unusual, but Sophia seems to trust you, and she's quite distressed." David didn't hesitate. "I'll be right there." The drive to Millbrook Middle School took 15 minutes, during which David's mind raced with possibilities. Why had Sophia asked for him specifically? What had triggered the panic attack? And why did he feel such a fierce protective instinct toward this girl he had known for less than 2 months? He found Sophia in the school nurse's office, sitting on a cot with her knees drawn up to her chest. Her face was pale, and she was breathing in the rapid, shallow pattern that indicated ongoing anxiety. "David," she said when she saw him, relief evident in her voice. "You came." "Of course I came," David said, sitting beside her. Tell me what happened. The fire alarm went off during math class, Sophia explained. Everyone was pushing and shoving in the hallway, and I couldn't breathe. It reminded me of when I was choking at the restaurant. David nodded, understanding immediately. Panic attacks can be triggered by situations that remind us of trauma. The crowded hallway, the noise, the feeling of not being able to breathe. Your mind connected it to the choking incident. I couldn't stop thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't been there, Sophia continued. If you hadn't known what to do. But I was there, David said firmly. And I did know what to do. You're safe. He guided her through the same breathing exercises he had used at the restaurant, his voice calm and reassuring. Within minutes, Sophia's breathing had returned to normal, and some color had returned to her cheeks. Better? He asked. Sophia nodded. David, can I ask you something? Of course. When you look at me, do I remind you of your daughter? The question was so direct, so perceptive, that David felt his carefully constructed walls crumble. Yes, he admitted. Yes, you do. Is that why you're so nice to me? Because I remind you of someone you lost? David considered the question carefully. At first maybe, but now. Now I care about you for who you are, not just for who you remind me of. Sophia smiled for the first time since he'd arrived. Good, because I care about you too. Not just because you saved my life, but because you're kind and smart and you make me feel safe. When Lucia finally arrived at the school, she found David and Sophia in the nurse's office, working on a worksheet together. Sophia was explaining a math problem to David, her earlier distress completely forgotten. I'm so sorry, Lucia said, her face flushed with guilt. I was in meetings and didn't get the message right away. It's fine, David assured her. Sophia handled everything very well. As they prepared to leave, the school nurse, Mrs. Patterson, approached David. I have to say, I'm impressed. Sophia's panic attacks have been getting worse lately, but you seem to know exactly how to help her. Panic attacks? David looked at Lucia with concern. This has happened before? Lucia looked uncomfortable. A few times. Since the choking incident, Dr. Hendricks says it's normal, but they're getting more frequent, David finished, and more intense. Yes, Lucia admitted. I don't know what to do about it. David looked at Sophia, who was listening to their conversation. With interest. Has anyone talked to her about what happened? Really talked to her about the trauma and how to process it? We've seen a counselor, Lucia said. But Sophia doesn't seem to open up much in those sessions. Maybe she needs to talk to someone she trusts, David suggested. Someone who was there, who understands what she went through. The implication was clear, and Lucia found herself nodding. Would you be willing to talk to her? I mean, professionally? I could pay you for your time. I don't want your money, David said, as he had before. But I'd be happy to help Sophia work through this. She deserves to feel safe and secure. As they walked to the parking lot, Sophia slipped her hand into David's. The gesture was so natural, so trusting, that David felt his chest tighten with emotion. Thank you for coming to get me, she said. I knew you would. How did you know? David asked. Sophia looked up at him with eyes that seemed to hold more wisdom than her 12 years. Should have allowed. Because that's what fathers do. They come when their daughters need them. The innocent statement hit David like a lightning bolt. He stopped walking, staring down at this remarkable girl who had just articulated something he had been feeling, but couldn't name. Sophia, he said carefully, what made you say that? I don't know, she admitted. It just felt right. As David watched Lucia and Sophia drive away, he felt something crystallize in his mind. The resemblance, the timing, the way Sophia seemed to trust him instinctively, the way she reminded him of Emma in countless small ways, it was all adding up to a possibility he had been afraid to consider. That night, David sat in his apartment. With Emma's photograph and Sophia's handmade card, studying both with new eyes. The facial structure was similar, but 12 years of growth could account for differences. The interests were the same, but many youngsters loved astronomy. The mannerisms were remarkably similar, but that could be coincidence. But what if it wasn't coincidence? What if the daughter he had been searching for had been sitting at his table for weeks, looking at him with eyes that seemed to recognize something familiar, trusting him with an instinct that went beyond the normal gratitude of a rescued youngster? David opened his laptop and began to search for information about Sophia Stone's adoption. He told himself he was being ridiculous, that he was grasping at straws, that he was setting himself up for another devastating disappointment. But as he typed Sophia Stone adoption records into the search engine, David's hands were steady. For the first time in 12 years, he felt like he might be on the verge of finding the answers he had been seeking. The question was he ready for what he might discover? David's fingers trembled as he navigated through the legal database. He had access through his private investigator's account. The monthly fee for the service had been a stretch on his restaurant salary, but over the years it had become as essential as rent or groceries, a lifeline to information that might lead him to Emma. The search results for Sophia Stone adoption were limited, but what he found made his blood run cold. The adoption had been processed through Whitmore and Associates, the same law firm that had handled his custody case 12 years ago. The timing was perfect. The adoption had been finalized just 6 months after David had lost custody of Emma, but it was the next piece of information that stopped his heart entirely. In the public records, buried in the legal documentation, was a reference to the birth name of the adopted youngster, Emma Sarah Harrison. David stared at the screen, his vision blurring as the implications hit him. Emma Sarah Harrison, his daughter, the youngster he had been searching for, the face that had haunted his dreams for 12 years, the reason he had abandoned his medical career and dedicated his life to an impossible quest. She had been at his table every Tuesday for 2 months. He had served her dinner, taught her about astronomy, comforted her during panic attacks, and saved her life from choking. And she had no idea who he was. With shaking hands, David pulled up more records. The adoption had been arranged by Lucia Stone and her then-husband, Richard Stone. The biological father had been listed as David Harrison, rights terminated by court order. The biological mother, Sarah Harrison, had signed away her parental rights as part of the custody agreement. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place with devastating clarity. After losing the custody battle, Sarah had apparently decided that adoption was better than allowing David any chance of regaining his rights. She had worked with Lucia Stone, who had been seeking a youngster to adopt, to arrange a placement that would ensure David could never find Emma. But Sarah had made one crucial mistake. She had kept Emma in the same city, probably thinking that the name change and wealthy adoptive family would be enough to keep her hidden. She had never imagined that Emma would end up in the same restaurant where David worked, or that a choking incident would bring them together. David pulled up the custody records next, rereading the painful details of the case that had destroyed his life. The court documents painted him as an unfit father, unreliable hours, modest income, history of putting his medical career before his family responsibilities. Sarah's lawyers had argued that Emma deserved stability and financial security, things that David couldn't provide. The final blow came when David found the financial records related to the adoption. Richard Stone had paid substantial fees to the law firm, fees that went far beyond normal adoption costs. It appeared that money had changed hands to ensure that the adoption was processed quickly and quietly, with minimal chance of the biological father discovering what had happened. David sat back in his chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he had discovered. For 12 years, he had been searching for Emma, never knowing that she had been living less than 10 miles away, being raised by the woman who now sat across from him at dinner every Tuesday. The irony was almost too much to bear. Lucia Stone, the woman who had thanked him for saving her daughter's life, was the person who had taken Emma away from him. The grateful mother who had offered him money and connections in exchange for his heroic actions had been hiding his own daughter from him for over a decade. And Emma, Sophia, had been right there, looking at him with eyes that seemed familiar, trusting him with an instinct that now made perfect sense. On some level, she had recognized him. The connection he had felt, the way she seemed to understand his pain, the way she had asked if she reminded him of his daughter, it had all been real. David looked at the photograph of baby Emma that he had carried for 12 years, then at the handmade card that Sophia had given him. The artistic style was similar, the careful attention to detail, the way she had drawn the stars with the same precision that Emma had used in her toddler drawings, but the most devastating realization was yet to come. David pulled up recent photographs of Lucia Stone from business publications and social media. In several photos, she was with Sophia, celebrating birthdays, attending school events, living the life of a loving mother and daughter. The photos showed a happy family, a successful woman providing her adopted daughter with every advantage that money could buy. Sophia attended private school, took piano lessons, had access to the best medical care and educational opportunities. She was healthy, intelligent, and seemingly well-adjusted, everything that the court had said David couldn't provide for Emma. Lucia had given to Sophia. The stable home, the financial security, the educational opportunities, it was all there, documented in social media posts and business magazine profiles. David felt a wave of conflicting emotions wash over him. Anger at the deception, grief for the lost years, joy at having found Emma, and a terrible uncertainty about what to do next. Sophia was clearly loved and well cared for. She had no memory of her life before the adoption, no knowledge of her biological father's existence. Was it fair to disrupt her life now? Was it right to reveal a truth that might destroy the only family she had ever known? But as David stared at the legal documents spread across his screen, he realized that the choice might not be his to make. Lucia Stone had built her relationship with Sophia on a foundation of lies. She had stolen Emma from her biological father and hidden the truth for 12 years. And now, through a twist of fate that seemed too incredible to be coincidence, father and daughter had found each other. David picked up his phone and stared at it for a long moment. He had Lucia's number from the restaurant reservation system. He could call her right now, confront her with what he had discovered, demand answers about why she had taken his daughter, but something held him back. The image of Sophia's face when she had talked about her birth parents, the way she had wondered if they thought about her, if they were proud of the person she was becoming. She deserved to know the truth, but she also deserved to have that truth revealed in a way that wouldn't destroy her sense of security and belonging. David closed his laptop and walked to the window of his apartment. The city lights twinkled below, and he could see the constellation that he had taught Sophia to identify just a few weeks ago. She had been so excited to learn about the stars, so proud when she could pick out the patterns he had shown her. His daughter. The girl he had been searching for was his daughter, and she had been learning about astronomy from her biological father without knowing it. The cosmic joke was almost too cruel to comprehend. David made a decision. He would confront Lucia, but not over the phone. He would demand a face-to-face meeting, away from the restaurant, away from Sophia. He would give her a chance to explain herself, to justify what she had done, to tell him why she had thought it was acceptable to steal a man's daughter and hide her for 12 years. And then, depending on her response, he would decide what to do next, whether to reveal the truth to Sophia, whether to demand legal action, whether to try to rebuild a relationship with the daughter who had been hidden from him for so long. But one thing was certain: the lies were going to end. Sophia deserved to know who her biological father was, and David deserved the chance to be the father he had always wanted to be. as he prepared for bed. David looked one more time at the photograph of baby Emma and the card that Sophia had made. For him, tomorrow he would begin the process of reclaiming his daughter. Tomorrow the truth would finally come to light, but tonight he allowed himself to feel something he hadn't experienced in 12 years. Hope. His daughter was alive, she was healthy, and she was within reach. After years of searching, years of false leads and crushing disappointments, he had finally found her. The question now was whether he would be able to keep her. David's hands were steady as he dialed Lucia's number, though his heart was pounding with an intensity that reminded him of his paramedic days. The difference was that no medical emergency had ever felt this personal, this potentially life-changing. Hello? Lucia's voice was professional, slightly distracted, probably reviewing documents or responding to emails even during her personal time. Lucia, this is David Harrison, from the Golden Fork. David, is everything all right? You sound... She paused, clearly picking up on the tension in his voice. I need to speak with you. Tonight, without Sophia. The request was so unusual, so far outside their normal dynamic, that Lucia immediately went on alert. Is this about the restaurant? Did something happen? No, David said carefully. This is about Sophia, about her adoption, about who she really is. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds. When Lucia finally spoke, her voice had changed, colder, more guarded. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do, David replied quietly. Meet me at Millbrook City Park, near the fountain, 1 hour. Come alone. David, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. 1 hour, Lucia. If you don't show up, I'll come to your office tomorrow, with documentation. The implied threat was clear, and Lucia's sharp intake of breath told him she understood the gravity of the situation. Fine, 1 hour. David arrived at the park 20 minutes early, needing time to prepare himself for a conversation that would change everything. The fountain was illuminated by soft lighting, and the surrounding benches were mostly empty except for a few joggers and dog walkers. It was a public space, but private enough for the kind of discussion they needed to have. When Lucia arrived, she looked nothing like the confident CEO who had been dining at his restaurant for weeks. Her face was pale, her normally perfect composure cracked, and she clutched her purse with hands that trembled slightly. David, she said as she approached, attempting to maintain her professional demeanor. I'm not sure what this is about, but... Emma. Sarah Harrison, David interrupted. Born March 15, 2012. Adopted by Lucia and Richard Stone in August 2013. Currently known as Sophia Stone. Lucia's face went white. She sat down heavily on the bench, her legs suddenly unable to support her. How did you ... How did I find out that the daughter I've been searching for 12 years has been sitting at my table every Tuesday night? David sat down beside her, his voice carefully controlled. The same daughter whose life I saved from choking, whose panic attacks I've been helping her through, whose homework I've been assisting with. David, please. No, David said firmly. For 12 years, I've been saying please, please let me see my daughter. Please tell me where she is. Please give me another chance to be her father. Now it's your turn to listen. Lucia stared at the fountain, unable to meet his eyes. I never meant for this to happen. I never imagined that you would ... that she would. That I would find her, that she would trust me. That we would connect in ways that transcend the lies you've built her life on. It wasn't supposed to be like this, Lucia whispered. The adoption was supposed to be a fresh start. A chance for her to have a stable life. Stable? David's voice rose slightly before he caught himself. You mean wealthy. You mean far away from her biological father, who loved her enough to never stop looking for her. You couldn't provide for her, Lucia said, finally looking at him. You were working irregular hours, living in a tiny apartment, barely making ends meet. The court agreed that she deserved better. The court was manipulated, David replied, by lawyers who were paid to make sure I never saw my daughter again. By a system that valued money over love. Lucia's composure cracked further. I gave her everything. The best schools, the best doctors, every opportunity money could buy. I loved her. I still love her. I don't doubt that, David said, and his voice was gentler now. But love built on lies isn't really love, is it? It's possession. That's not fair. Fair? David laughed bitterly. You want to talk about fair? How about 12 years of not knowing if my daughter was alive or dead? How about working restaurant jobs to pay for private investigators? How about seeing her face in every girl her age? And wondering if this time, finally, I had found her? Lucia was crying now, tears streaming down her face. I thought it would be better if she never knew. If she could just be happy without the complications of her biological family. And what about me? David asked. What about my right to be her father? What about her right to know where she came from? You had your chance, Lucia said, a flash of her old defensiveness returning. The court decided. Based on lies and manipulation, David interrupted. Based on the testimony of a woman who was willing to give up her daughter rather than let her biological father have custody. Based on lawyers who were paid to ensure a specific outcome. The mention of Sarah seemed to deflate Lucia further. Sarah said you were unreliable. That you put your career before your family. That Emma would be better off with people who could give her stability. Sarah said whatever she needed to say to justify her decision, David replied. She wanted to start fresh with her new husband, and Emma was a complication she didn't want to deal with. But you left medicine, Lucia pointed out. You gave up your career. If you were so dedicated to being a father, why did you walk away from everything you had worked for? David stared at her for a long moment. Because I realized that none of it mattered without Emma. The career, the success, the respect, it was all meaningless if I couldn't be there for my daughter. So you became a restaurant server? I became a man who was available, who had regular hours, who could drop everything if a call came in saying that Emma had been found, who could be the father she deserved if I ever got a second chance. Lucia absorbed this information, her expression shifting as she began to understand the depth of David's sacrifice. You've been waiting for her all this time. Every day for 12 years, David confirmed. And now I've found her. She's been right there, trusting me, connecting with me, reminding me why I wanted to be a father in the first place. She doesn't know, Lucia said quietly. She has no idea who you are. No, she doesn't, but she should. She has a right to know who her biological father is, and I have a right to be part of her life. What do you want? Lucia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. David considered the question carefully. I want the truth, all of it. I want to know exactly how you found her, how much you paid to make me disappear, how you've justified this deception for 12 years. And then we figure out how to tell Sophia the truth without destroying her sense of security. Because despite everything you've done, despite the lies and the manipulation, I can see that you love her. And more importantly, she loves you. Lucia looked up at him in surprise. You're not going to try to take her away from me. Take her away? David shook his head. I'm not Sarah. I'm not going to rip a youngster away from the only family she's ever known. But I'm also not going to continue pretending to be a stranger to my own daughter. What does that mean? It means we need to find a way to make this work. All of us. Sophia deserves to know her biological father, but she also deserves to keep the mother who raised her. The question is whether you're willing to share her. Lucia stared at him for a long moment, seeming to process the implications of his words. You're not going to fight me in court? I'm not Sarah, David repeated. I'm not going to put Sophia through the trauma of a custody battle, but I am going to be part of her life, one way or another. The choice is whether we do this cooperatively, or whether you force me to take legal action. And if I refuse? If I tell you to stay away from her, David's expression hardened, then I'll have no choice but to reveal the truth in a way that might be more traumatic for Sophia. She's already starting to ask questions, Lucia. She's already wondering about her birth parents. How long do you think it will be before she starts putting the pieces together herself? The threat was implicit but clear. Lucia could cooperate in revealing the truth gradually and sensitively, or she could risk Sophia discovering it on her own in a way that might destroy her trust in everyone around her. I need time to think about this, Lucia said finally. You have until tomorrow evening, David replied. We need to tell her soon, before she figures it out herself. She's too smart to be fooled much longer. As they prepared to leave, Lucia turned to him one more time. David, I want you to know, I never meant to hurt you. I thought I was doing what was best for Emma. Her name is Emma, David said quietly. She may go by Sophia now, but she was born Emma Sarah Harrison, and she's my daughter. Nothing you did can change that. I know, Lucia whispered. I know. As David watched her walk away, he felt a mixture of anger, relief, and terror. The confrontation was over, but the real challenge was just beginning. Tomorrow he would have to find a way to tell a 12-year-old girl that the man she had come to trust and care for was actually the biological father she had wondered about her entire life. The question now was whether their relationship would survive the truth, or whether the revelation would destroy the trust and connection they had built over the past 2 months. But for the first time in 12 years, David felt like he was truly Emma's father again. Not the man who had lost her, not the man who had been searching for her, but the man who was finally going to be part of her life. The hard part was just beginning. The private dining room at the Golden Fork had never felt so heavy with anticipation. David had arrived 2 hours early, unable to concentrate on his other tables, his mind consumed with the conversation that would change everything. He had rehearsed what he would say dozens of times, but every scenario seemed inadequate for the magnitude of what he was about to reveal. Lucia and Sophia arrived at their usual time, but David could immediately sense the tension radiating from Lucia. She was paler than usual, her movements more deliberate, her smile forced. Sophia, however, seemed her normal bright self, chattering excitedly about a science project as they took their seats. David, Sophia called out when she saw him. Guess. What? I got an A on my astronomy report. The one you helped me with. David's heart clenched at her excitement. That's wonderful, Sophia. I'm very proud of you. The teacher said my section on constellation navigation was particularly impressive, Sophia continued. She asked where I learned so much about it. What did you tell her? David asked, glancing at Lucia. I told her that a friend taught me. Someone who really understands the stars. The innocence in her voice made what David had to do even more difficult. He looked at Lucia, who gave him an almost imperceptible nod. They had agreed to tell Sophia tonight, but the reality of the moment was more overwhelming than either of them had anticipated. Sophia, David said carefully, there's something your mother and I need to talk to you about, something important. Sophia's expression grew serious, picking up on the gravity in his tone. Is everything okay? Did I do something wrong? No. Sweetheart, Lucia said quickly. You didn't do anything wrong. But there's something about your life, about your family, that you need to know. David sat down across from Sophia, his hands folded on the table. Sophia, you know that you're adopted, right? Yes, Sophia said slowly. Mom told me when I was little. She said my birth parents couldn't take care of me, so they found me a loving family. That's true, David said. But there's more to the story, more about who your birth parents are. Sophia's eyes widened with interest. Do you know them? Do you know who they are? Who they are? David felt his throat tighten. I know your biological father very well. Really? Where is he? What's he like? Sophia's excitement was palpable. David looked at Lucia, who nodded encouragingly despite the tears in her eyes. Sophia, your biological father is ... He's sitting right here. It's me. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Sophia stared at David, her expression cycling through confusion, disbelief, and something that might have been recognition. You ... You're my birth father? She whispered. Yes, David said softly. Your name used to be Emma Sarah Harrison. I've been looking for you for 12 years. Sophia's face went through a range of emotions: shock, confusion, and then something unexpected, relief. I knew it, she said quietly. I mean, I didn't know it, but I felt it. The way you looked at me, the way you seemed to understand me, the way you were always there when I needed help. Lucia leaned forward. Sophia, I know this is confusing. Why didn't you tell me? Sophia interrupted, looking directly at David. Why didn't you tell me who you were? Because I didn't know, David said. I've been searching for you your entire life. I didn't know that Emma had become Sophia, that you had been adopted by your mother. I only found out yesterday, but you recognized me, didn't you? That's why you were so nice to me, David nodded. You reminded me of someone very important. But I was afraid to hope, afraid to believe that I had actually found you after all these years. Sophia turned to Lucia. And you knew? You knew he was my father? Lucia's composure cracked. I didn't know he was your father until yesterday. I knew your birth father's name was David Harrison, but I had no idea he was our server. When he told me who he was, I was as shocked as you are now. But why was I adopted? Sophia asked. Why? Couldn't David keep me? The question that David had been dreading had finally come. He looked at Lucia, who nodded for him to continue. Your biological mother and I went through a difficult divorce when you were 2 years old, David explained. Carefully. She remarried, and she and her new husband decided that you would have a better life with a different family. One that could provide things that I couldn't at the time. Like what? Money, David said simply. A big house, private schools, opportunities that I couldn't afford on a paramedic salary. Sophia processed this information with the seriousness of someone trying to understand adult complexities. But didn't you want to keep me? More than anything in the world, David said, his voice breaking slightly. Losing you was the worst thing that ever happened to me. I never stopped looking for you, never stopped hoping that someday I would find you. Then why didn't you fight harder? Sophia asked with the directness that only youngsters could manage. I did fight, David replied. I spent everything I had on lawyers, on private investigators, on searches that led nowhere. But the legal system decided that you would be better off with your adoptive family. And they were right, weren't they? Sophia said quietly. I had a good life with Mom. She took care of me, gave me everything I needed. David nodded. Yes, they were right about that. Your mother gave you a wonderful life, opportunities I never could have provided. I can see how much she loves you. But you love me too, Sophia said. It wasn't a question. More than you'll ever know, David confirmed. Every day for 12 years, I've wondered if you were safe, if you were happy, if you knew that your biological father was thinking about you. Sophia was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she had learned. Finally, she looked up at both adults. So what happens now? David and Lucia exchanged glances. That depends on what you want, David said. I'm not going to try to take you away from your mother. She's been your family for 12 years, and that's not going to change. But I would like to be part of your life, if you'll let me. As my father? Sophia asked. As your biological father, David clarified. Your mother will always be your mother. But yes, I'd like to be your father too. Sophia considered this. Would that mean I'd have 2 families? It would mean you'd have more people who love you, Lucia said softly. David is a good man, Sophia. He saved your life, and he's been nothing but kind to you. If you want him to be part of your life, I think that would be wonderful. What about my name? Sophia asked. Am I Emma or Sophia? You're whoever you want to be, David said. Names are just labels. What matters is who you are inside. Sophia smiled for the first time since the conversation began. I think I like being Sophia, but I also like knowing that I used to be Emma. Emma loved astronomy too, David said. She used to make me tell her about the stars every night before bed. Is that why you knew so much about constellations? Sophia asked. Because you taught them to me before? Yes, David said. When I was teaching you about the stars these past few weeks, it felt like I was remembering something precious that I had lost. And now you found me, Sophia said with the wisdom of someone who understood the magnitude of what had happened. Now I found you, David agreed. Sophia looked at both adults, her expression serious. I want you both to be my parents. Is that okay? David felt tears he had been holding back for 12 years finally fall. That's more than okay, sweetheart. That's everything I've ever wanted. Lucia reached across the table and took Sophia's hand. Are you sure? This is a big change, and it's okay if you need time to think about it. I've been thinking about it my whole life, Sophia said. I always wondered about my birth parents, always hoped they were good people who loved me. Now I know they are. Your birth mother loved you too, David said carefully. She made the decision she thought was best for you, even if it was hard for everyone involved. Do you think I'll ever meet her? Sophia asked. Maybe someday, David said. But for now, let's focus on getting to know each other. We have a lot of catching up to do. As they talked through the evening, David marveled at how easily Sophia seemed to accept the truth. She asked thoughtful questions about his life, about why he had become a paramedic, about what he remembered from when she was little. She seemed genuinely interested in understanding her biological father, not just as the man who had saved her life, but as the person who had given her life. When it came time to leave, Sophia surprised both adults by asking if she could hug David goodbye. I've wanted to do that for weeks, she admitted as she wrapped her arms around him. I just didn't know why. I've wanted to hug you too, David said, holding his daughter for the first time in 12 years. I love you, Sophia. I always have. I love you too, Dad, she said, the word coming naturally despite the circumstances. As David watched them leave, he felt a profound sense of completion. The search was over. The mystery was solved. His daughter was safe, loved, and wanted him to be part of her life. For the first time in 12 years, David Harrison felt like a father again. The Saturday morning sun streamed through the windows of David's new apartment as he prepared breakfast for Sophia, who was spending the weekend with him. The space was larger than his previous studio, with a second bedroom that had been transformed into what Sophia called her astronomy headquarters, complete with a telescope, star charts, and a comfortable reading chair where they spent hours discussing the mysteries of the universe. Dad, did you know that there's going to be a meteor shower next week? Sophia called from her room, where she was getting dressed for their planned day together. I did know that, David replied, flipping pancakes with a skill that had developed over months of weekend father-daughter breakfasts. The Perseids, some of the best celestial entertainment of the year. Can we watch it together? Mom said she might join us if she's not working late. The easy way Sophia navigated between her two parents had been one of the most remarkable aspects of their new family dynamic. Rather than feeling torn between loyalties, she seemed to thrive on having two adults who loved her unconditionally, each bringing different strengths to her life. David had returned to medicine, accepting a position in the pediatric emergency department at Millbrook General. The transition had been smoother than expected. His years of keeping his certifications current had maintained his skills. and his experience with Sophia's medical emergencies had reignited his passion for helping youngsters in crisis. Dr. Harrison, his colleague Dr. Martinez, had said during his first week back, "You seem different from the paramedic I remember. More focused, more purposeful. I have more to fight for now," David had replied, thinking of Sophia's bright smile and the way she trusted him to make everything better when the world felt scary. The restaurant had been understanding about his career change, especially after David had trained several staff members in basic first aid and emergency response. The Golden Fork now proudly advertised that they had medically trained personnel on staff, and David still occasionally filled in during special events when they needed experienced servers. Lucia had initially struggled with the new arrangement, her control-oriented nature making it difficult to share parental decisions with someone else. But over time, she had come to appreciate having another adult who understood Sophia's needs and could provide support during difficult moments. "I never realized how lonely single parenting could be," she had admitted to David during one of their weekly co-parenting meetings. "Having someone who cares about her as much as I do, it's actually a relief." The legal aspects of their situation had been complex but manageable. David had chosen not to pursue any action against Lucia or the adoption agency, focusing instead on establishing his legal rights as Sophia's biological father. The paperwork had been extensive, but the end result was a custody arrangement that gave him regular visitation and input into major decisions about Sophia's life. More importantly, they had established a family therapy routine with Dr. Rebecca Chen, a specialist in adoption and family dynamics. The sessions had helped all three of them navigate the complex emotions involved in rebuilding relationships that had been fractured by years of separation and secrecy. "The remarkable thing," Dr. Chen had observed during one of their sessions, "is how naturally Sophia has adapted to having two parents. Her resilience suggests that she always sensed something was missing, and finding David has filled that void." Sophia's panic attacks had virtually disappeared once the truth was revealed. Dr. Chun explained that the attacks had likely been triggered by unconscious anxiety about her identity and origins, stress that had been resolved by finally understanding who she was and where she came from. "It's like a puzzle piece finally clicking into place," Sophia had explained to her science teacher when asked about her improved emotional state. "I spent my whole life wondering about my birth parents, and now I know. It makes everything else easier." The most surprising development had been the relationship between David and Lucia. What had started as a tense co-parenting arrangement had gradually evolved into genuine friendship. They had both been shaped by their love for Sophia, and they had both made mistakes in their efforts to protect her. "I owe you an apology," Lucia had said during one of their therapy sessions. "I convinced myself that keeping you away from Sophia was protecting her, but I was really protecting myself. I was afraid that if she knew about you, she might love me less." "I understand," David had replied. "You were doing what you thought was best with the information you had. I can't be angry about that. But I kept information from you for 12 years. I kept you from your daughter. And now she's back in my life," David had said simply. "I can't change the past, but I can make sure the future is different." Their weekly dinners at the Golden Fork had become a family tradition. Roberto, the manager, had reserved their usual private dining room every Tuesday evening, and the entire staff had come to know and love Sophia. She had become something of a mascot for the restaurant, helping with small tasks and charming customers. With her knowledge of astronomy and her enthusiasm for life, "She's a special girl," Roberto had told David. "You can see how much she loves having you both in her life." David's relationship with Sophia had deepened beyond his wildest expectations. She had inherited his curiosity about the natural world, his methodical approach to problem solving, and his ability to remain calm under pressure. But she had also maintained the confidence and ambition that Lucia had nurtured. creating a personality that was uniquely her own. "I want to be a doctor like you," Sophia had announced one evening while they were stargazing from his apartment balcony. "But I want to specialize in space medicine. I want to help astronauts stay healthy when they're exploring the universe." "That's an amazing goal," David had said, his heart swelling with pride. "I think you'd be brilliant at it. Will you help me study for it? I know it's going to be really hard." "Every step of the way," David had promised. "For as long as you want me to." On this particular Saturday morning, as they finished breakfast and prepared for a day at the Science Museum, David reflected on how dramatically his life had changed. 6 months ago, he had been a lonely restaurant server, spending his evenings searching for a daughter he feared he might never find. Now he was a practicing physician again, with a purpose that extended beyond his own healing to helping other families avoid the kind of trauma he had experienced. "Dad, are you ready?" Sophia called from the living room. "I want to get to the planetarium before the morning show starts." "Almost ready," David called back, finishing the dishes and thinking about how natural it felt to hear her call him Dad. The word had come easily to her, as if she had been waiting her whole life to say it to him. As they walked to the museum, Sophia chattering excitedly about the exhibits she wanted to see, David felt a profound sense of gratitude. Not just for having found his daughter, but for the way the experience had changed him. He was a better doctor now, more empathetic with families facing crisis. He was a better man, more appreciative of the precious nature of family relationships. "Dad, do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't choked that night?" Sophia asked as they entered the museum. David considered the question. "I think we would have found each other eventually. Some connections are too strong to stay broken forever." "I think so too," Sophia said, slipping her hand into his. "I think the universe wanted us to be together." As they walked through the exhibits, David marveled at his daughter's intelligence and curiosity. She asked thoughtful questions about everything from quantum physics to marine biology, and her enthusiasm was infectious. Other museum visitors often stopped to listen to her explanations of complex scientific concepts, impressed by her knowledge and passion. "She's going to change the world," Lucia had said during their last co-parenting meeting. "I can feel it." "She already has," David had replied. "She changed mine." That evening, as David tucked Sophia into bed in her room at his apartment, she asked him to tell her a story about when she was little. "I used to sing to you," David said, sitting on the edge of her bed. "A song about stars and dreams and all the amazing things you would do when you grew up. Will you sing it to me now?" Sophia asked. David's voice was soft but clear as he sang. The same lullaby he had sung to Emma 12 years ago. The melody was simple, but the words were filled with love and hope and the promise of a future bright with possibility. When he finished, Sophia smiled sleepily. "I think I remember that song. I think I dreamed about it sometimes." "Maybe you did," David said, kissing her forehead. "Maybe some connections are too strong to be completely broken." "Dad?" "Yes, sweetheart. Thank you for never giving up on me. Thank you for finding me." "Thank you for being worth finding," David replied. "I love you, Sophia. I love you too, Dad." As David turned off the light and headed to his own room, he felt a peace he hadn't experienced in over a decade. The search was over. The questions were answered. His daughter was safe, loved, and thriving. More importantly, they had a future together. Not the future that had been stolen from them 12 years ago, but a new future built on truth, understanding, and the unbreakable bond between a father and his daughter. Outside his window, the stars shone brightly in the clear night sky, the same stars that had once seemed like distant symbols of hope, and were now simply beautiful lights illuminating the path forward. For the first time in 12 years, David Harrison slept peacefully, knowing that his daughter was safe in the next room, and that tomorrow would bring new opportunities to be the father he had always dreamed of being. The restaurant server who had saved a choking girl, had found his way back to being a doctor, a father, and a man at peace with his place in the universe. And the girl who had been hidden from him for 12 years had finally found her way home. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.